propriedade intelectual é responsável hoje por até 80% do valor das empresas. Mas isso não acontece apenas porque as empresas dão valor à sua propriedade intelectual. A propriedade intelectual vale muito porque a sociedade dá valor ao esforço de solucionar seus problemas e de lhe criar oportunidades. Nosso congresso desse ano vai reunir especialistas em propriedade intelectual, juristas, economistas do desenvolvimento e da inovação para nos guiarem nessa importante discussão. O pano de fundo escolhido não poderia ser melhor: as maravilhas da cidade do Rio de Janeiro. Para comemorar seus 60 anos de existência, a ABPI reunirá os participantes nos mirantes deslumbrantes do Pão de Açúcar, ícone turístico do Rio de Janeiro, aclamado por visitantes do mundo inteiro. Durante 3 dias, teremos a oportunidade de nos encontrarmos, fazer negócios e, sobretudo, de discutir e aprofundar nosso entendimento do papel da propriedade intelectual frente aos desafios brasileiros. Da consolidação do agronegócio ao desenvolvimento do turismo e de indústrias avançadas, da transformação digital e da transição energética ao estímulo ao empreendedorismo e à inclusão social. Participe e se engaje com o compromisso social do Congresso da BPI de 2023. Esperamos vocês de 20 a 22 de agosto na cidade maravilhosa do Rio de Janeiro.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rodrigo Ouro Preto. I'd like to welcome you to ABPI, Brazilian IP Association. We're here today, this afternoon, for another webinar. Today's topic is going to be on patent eligibility in areas of computer devices and biotechnology in the United States. And I have with us today 2 representatives of the USPTO. First of all, Gordon, who's at my right. Gordon is a patent attorney with the USPTO Office of Policy and International Affairs. Gordon earned his JD from the George Washington University with highest honors. He clerked with Judge Rader in the Federal Circuit, and he's joined the USPTO since 2021. Now I can introduce to you Hasan. Hasan to my left here. He's also a patent attorney with the USPTO Office of Policy and International Affairs, working on domestic and international IP policy issues. Hasan earned his BA from the University of Virginia, an MS from the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine, and a JD from St. John's University Law School. Well, welcome very much. Thank you for your collaborating with ABPI in this event. And please, I don't know who's starting first. Okay, please, Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And we're very happy to be here with everybody here in person, as well as everybody who's watching online today. Hopefully we'll have an enjoyable discussion here today. And I didn't practice with this, but we'll see if I can work this properly with the presentation. And while we're figuring out the technical, I would like to give a thanks in advance to our translators. My brain is not linear, so I'm going to make their jobs very difficult. So stay with me. As Rodrigo mentioned, I'm Gordon Klancnik, and this is Hasan Ahmed, and we're with the Office of Policy and International Affairs. Today, we're going to be talking about 4 basic things regarding subject matter eligibility. The first is the statutory basis. The second are the judicial exceptions to the statutory basis. Then the USPTO's 2-step framework for analysis for these type of subject matter eligibility rejections. And then we're going to come and we're going to talk about four different examples. Two of them are biotech and two of them are computer implemented. But as we'll mention, there are lots and lots of examples on the USPTO's website. And these are just two of the examples that are available. So subject matter eligibility. There are two criteria for subject matter eligibility. The test is the first is that the claimed invention must be to one of the four statutory categories. That is a process, a machine, a manufacturer, or a composition of matter. And we sometimes say 101. And so 101 defines these things. And we'll put the text up on the screen later. And then second, even if the text of the statute says it's permissible, our courts in the United States have said certain things are not permissible. So you first have to say, is it in one of the four categories? And then say, is it one of the things the courts have said are ineligible for patenting, despite being one of those four things? And judicial exceptions, the second, the claim invention must not be directed to a judicial exception unless the claim as a whole includes additional limitations amounting to significantly more than the exception. And this is all confusing language, and it's coming out of court decisions, so we have to live with it. Judicial exceptions are limited to abstract ideas, laws of nature, and natural phenomena. And then on top of that, particularly for patent prosecution, there's a lot of guidance, and the USPTO has put out a lot of information because this is a very difficult and challenging area of the law where people need advice on how to prosecute their applications. Examiners, there are 10,000 examiners, Hasan, is that right? About 8,000. So all of those examiners need to apply the same law. And so there's a lot of guidance to help both the applicants and the examiners. And the USPTO believes in providing that advice to help both the examining corps as well as the applicants. And the advice is available both in the NPEP, which I'm sure that everybody here is familiar with, but it's also at this webpage, which is patent eligibility, all one word after uspto.gov, and that'll take you to the correct place. So we will now move to the two different things that we're going to talk about next. And again, it's the statutory basis and then the judicial exceptions. And this will set up the analysis that we'll talk about later. The four statutory categories in 101 are: it's a process, it's a machine, it's a manufacturer, it's a composition of matter. These are all things that should be familiar with you. It's things that are either tangible or create something that's tangible. Then the judicially created court-made exceptions are laws of nature, natural phenomenon, and abstract ideas. So the statutory basis and the statute itself says, this is the actual text, is whoever invents or discovers any new and useful process, machine, manufacture, composition of matter, or any new and useful improvement thereof may obtain a patent, therefore subject to the conditions and requirements of this title. Now, this language has been essentially the same for 200 years, which is almost shocking to me. And so I actually had to look it up. And these are all the statutes from 1790 and 1793. And then the most recent act is the 1952 Act. So this language in the statute is the same. Now, the court decisions are the ones that we need to worry about. So in section 101, it's a very dense and loaded statute. So it's not just subject matter eligibility. There are actually 5 separate and distinct requirements that come from US law that stem from 101. So even though you say 101, we all think subject matter eligibility. Well, that's number 3. So it says the language on the previous slide, and this is verbatim, and I've just broken it up, is whoever invents or discovers. That means whoever, meaning the inventor. And so it needs to be the inventor who gets the patent. Any new and useful, it has to have utility. It can't be something that lacks utility. Now, the utility requirement is like a perpetual motion machine. That's the utility requirement here. There's a separate utility requirement in 112. Here we go. This is what we're going to talk about today. The process, machine, or manufacture, or composition of matter in any new or useful improvement thereof. And that is the statutory categories of subject matter eligibility. And then it's may obtain, and the key word here is a patent. Therefore, you can get one patent, you can't get two patents on the same thing. And that's why in the US, when you get a double patenting rejection, a statutory or non-statutory, that A in the English is what's developed all of that law. And then the fifth one is not really a requirement, but it's a reminder that it says, okay, even if you pass the subject matter eligibility hurdle, even if you've created something that is even eligible for patenting, you still don't get a patent until you show that it's novel, non-obvious, enabled, described, all the stuff. It's definite, all of the things that are the other provisions. And that's coming out of that last clause. So it's a very dense set of words that's very old, but it has a lot of meaning. Okay, we're going to quickly go through those statutory categories. There's nothing really new here, but it's a good reminder as to what even the door can be opened before the courts shut it. So process, machine, manufacture, composition of matter. A process is actually, and I'm a chemical engineer, so that little diagram in the lower right-hand corner is near and dear to my heart before I became a patent attorney. So it's actually defined also in the US statute, which says the term process means a process, art, or method, and includes a new use for a known process, machine, manufacture, composition of matter or material. So whenever I look at this, I always laugh because it says a process means a process. And you think, well, I'm not sure what else a process is supposed to mean, but thank you for reminding me that that's what it includes. But the point is that it's a broad category. And to the extent that you can say, well, that's not a process, if it's a method, it's all these things. And so that's the point of providing a further definition that actually refers to itself, that's reflexive. And it's just a process is a series of steps. So the next category is a machine, parts of devices, complete devices, combination of devices. This is nothing earth-shattering. Manufacturer, so these are produced items, physical articles or objects. These are not, again, very, very straightforward, at least in my opinion. The statute is very straightforward, at least I believe. Composition of matter, chemical compounds, combination of compounds, composition of substances, composite of articles. Again, very broad. I mean, it's a composition. We're not talking, there's no hidden meaning here that we need to worry about. One thing though, in US law that is not in the statute, that's not in here, are use claims. And so you might see a 101 rejection if you file a US case with use claims. Now, what's a use claim? A use claim is, there's two examples here. It's the use of a composition of matter as a component of a machine. It's the use of a chemical compound as a medicament to treat a disease, as a medicine. Those types of claims are not allowed in the US. You will get a 101 rejection, but they're typically fairly straightforward to avoid. You can usually turn them into method claims. That depends on the description. Oftentimes, though, there already are method claims in the case. So if you're sending a case to the United States that has use claims, that has method claims, you might want to think, do I cancel these in a preliminary amendment to save the claim fees? So, but they can raise also indefiniteness issues. Is it possible to transform them in a method claim? And there's a MPEP section directly on point here. So use claims, it's not the point of our talk today, but use claims will receive a 101 rejection as directed to ineligible subject. Okay, That was the easy part. Here comes the complications. Here comes the court's court-made prohibitions. And I will freely admit this is a challenge for those of us who are trained in U.S. law even as well. Okay, so here we go. The Supreme Court of the United States has recognized implicit limits on eligibility in view of the history and context of the statutory text. And this is common law developed through judicial cases. And so what that means is that you have to look at the facts of each case and you have to understand, is your case similar or dissimilar from those facts? And that's where the USPTO guidance comes in. There are three big areas where it says abstract ideas, natural laws, and natural phenomena are not eligible for patenting. And the abstract ideas is typically where the computer-related inventions fall down. Natural laws, natural phenomena are usually where the biotech falls down. Not exclusively, but that's usually where you need to look. All right, so here are some of the Supreme Court decisions, and you can see they stretch all the way back to 1852, and then there was a break between 1981 and then 2010. And so the recent case law is really based on those last four: the Bilski case, the Mayo case, the Myriad case, and the Alice case, and particularly those last three. And the Supreme Court typically doesn't have an interest in U.S. patent law, but obviously they took a very strong interest. And because of that, we have a lot of Supreme Court law that we need to follow. And so those four cases in the modern case law, Bilski related to a business method for hedging risk, which was perhaps not traditionally thought of as a area for patenting. Mayo related to a method of optimizing drug dosages for treatment of autoimmune diseases. And this is where that two-step framework we're going to talk about was first introduced. A Myriad related to isolated DNA, meaning genes, associated with an increased risk of breast cancer and synthetic DNA molecules created from RNA, known as complementary DNA, cDNA. So this is medical diagnostics typically rely on the Myriad case. And then we also have the Alice case. And that's the computer implemented process, computer system and computer readable medium for mitigating settlement risk. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Alice in Wonderland from, I think it was Lewis Carroll. Is that right? Yeah. So be as indicating that yes, that, and so everybody says, oh, we're through the looking glass, and it's all very confusing based on the shared word of Alice. But it's sort of a lot of bad puns that aren't necessarily wrong. You know, we need the Mad Hatter and everything else. Anyway, okay. So although we have those cases, we also have a number of Federal Circuit opinions. And the Federal Circuit has tried to help us understand and try to help the USPTO and applicants develop the law. And they've developed it through 200 decisions that apply this two-step framework. I am not smart enough to remember 200 decisions on anything, but just know that there is a lot of developed case law, and just have to understand that there's a lot of very smart people thinking about this issue in a lot of different factual circumstances that sometimes create confusion because it can be difficult to understand how the facts of one case dictate a different result in a different case. So, but the Federal Circuit, as you may know, has the exclusive appellate jurisdiction over patent cases, including appeals from decisions of district courts and from the USPTO. So they are, unlike other courts of appeals, they are experts in patent law. And so this actually helps with the uniformity to the extent possible. So the USPTO has issued this patent eligibility guidance, and this particularly as a patent prosecutor, if you're directing your U.S. counsel, is really what they probably will be relying on, and frankly, is something that you as an attorney could focus on if to the extent that you want to understand what it is that's in the rejection and what it is that your US counsel is saying. And here is the famous flow chart. And I say famous because it's in every single presentation we put on this. It's also in the MPEP, and it is a great summary as to what happens at one step in each one. And it's a flow chart, so it's near and dear to my heart. So the first step is again, is the door open, or is it one of the statutory categories that's in the statute? That and then the second thing, and you can kind of see, is there a streamlined analysis? And I've never really fully understand when something is a streamlined analysis, but it's sort of, you know, when you see it, it's eligible. And there are examples given by the USPTO of what is and what is not, or can be a streamlined analysis. And then here are the two very challenging areas. It's 2A and 2B. Now, this used to be step 2, but rather than 2, 3, now we say 2A and 2B, so that way you understand that it's related to the previous step 2. Exactly. So exactly. And as Hasan reminded everybody, it's also follows now the Supreme Court, which said there's 2 steps. And we said, of course, there's 1 and there's 2A and 2B. That sounds like 2 steps to me. So the first step is whether there are judicial exceptions, and that's 2A here. Is the claim directed to a law of nature, a natural phenomenon, a product of nature, or an abstract idea? And then if that is yes, you say, well, is there an inventive concept? Meaning, does the claim recite additional elements that amount to, here is the key phrase, significantly more than judicial exception? And you might say, why is that the key phrase? And that's what you need to argue. You need to say, in this case, there is significantly more because, in order to establish, and there's a lot of guidance by the USPTO on what is significantly more. And so when we talk about the inventive, what's that? You do, well, eventually you develop those, so you do eventually know it when you see it, but also you can point to and say, in this case, in those, based on the 200 Federal Circuit opinions, there is significantly more. In this case, there is not, but if I add such and such element, there might be significantly more. So that's the key. And again, where you want to be as a patent practitioner is you want to be over here. Claim qualifies as eligible subject matter. You don't want to be over here. That's no. You want to be yes. Although here you want to be no. So, but you want to be this side and not on that side. And that's the pathways to eligibility. I love whoever developed this chart is like spent hours. Must have been a chemical engineer. It's right. That's right. So here we go. Step 1, statutory categories. The claim must be directed to one of the 4 statutory categories. We just went over these. I won't bore you with them again. And you can satisfy more than one category. So you don't have to say it's a machine or a manufacturer, or it's a manufacturer, not a composition of matter. It doesn't matter. You can say it's both. This is typically not where you get hung up. As an examiner, what the examiner will do is they'll apply in the US the so-called broadest reasonable interpretation, and that comes from other case law. That's a different standard than in other cases, but the examiner is required during prosecution to say, what is the broadest reasonable interpretation of this claim? There could be other interpretations that are narrower, but what's the broadest reasonable one? And it's BRI sometimes is what they say. If the claim dimension does not fall in one of the 4 categories, for example, there is a case that involved transitory signals. So, then the claim is not eligible. So examples of the claims that are not eligible include the transitory signals per se, a human per se, a software per se, meaning as it is, without any additional anything else. So And the transitory signals case is in Ray Nuchin, and that came out of some of the early case law. But even if the claim is directed to the statutory category, it must avoid the judicial exceptions. So here we go. We are in step 2, because as Hasan reminded us, there are only 2 steps. So step 2 is abstract ideas. Now, what are abstract ideas? These are primarily 3 main categories: mathematical concepts, certain methods of organizing human activity, and mental processes. So famous equations per se on their own, abstract idea. Organizing human activity, the examples that we can give here are fundamental economic principles or practices, hedging, insurance, mitigating risk, commercial legal interactions, legal obligations, advertising, marketing or sales, managing personal behavior. These are the types of things that are just methods of organizing human behavior. And then mental processes, that includes things that are steps that could be performed only in your head. Now, you could say, well, no. I've programmed a computer. I've implemented it in this way. But if the broadest reasonable interpretation includes purely mental thoughts, then that is just a that includes a mental process, and that is not permissible. Yeah. So I would study to the extent that you have something on the margin that relates to particularly the second category. I would review those particular examples and perhaps consider not including those words in your claim in your abstract to avoid a rejection and avoid being put into an art unit that is frankly not exactly what the invention is. So, or may not be. If it is purely a method of human activity, too bad, you should not apply for a patent. So step 2, here we go, judicial exceptions. The second category is laws of nature, natural phenomenon, and products of nature. And again, these come out of cases. And so it's important to understand what the cases say. So the basic tools of scientific and technological work are not patentable because those are the manifestations of laws of nature, are part of the storehouse of knowledge that are free to all men and reserved exclusively to none. Sometimes I have difficulty reading Supreme Court cases from the 1800s, but the way that they talked in the 1940s is really elegant. You know, it's free to all men and reserved exclusively to none. Makes you really feel good. Excited about patent laws, right? So a new mineral, the second category is a new mineral discovered in earth or a new plant that's found in the wild is not patentable subject matter. So the mere fact that you discovered something, and one of the examples we'll talk about later is related to this. So the mere fact you found something, you cannot get a patent on that thing you found. You didn't invent it, you found it, you discovered it. And then likewise, Einstein could not patent his celebrated law that E equals mc squared, nor could have Newton patented the law of gravity. Now, that's true, but everything that I'm aware of relies on natural laws, so it can't be that exception swallows what is eligible, because I'm not aware of doing anything that doesn't rely on some natural phenomenon that's described. So again, new and useful mathematical formula, electromagnetism, steam power, qualities of bacteria, heat of the sun, electricity, so on and so forth. So, but Hasan will talk more about that later. Okay. This text is really small, and I know it's really small, but these are right out of the MPEP that are out of particular cases. And these are concepts and products as examples of laws of nature or natural phenomenon that's coming out of particular cases. So isolated DNA, that's, myriad, right? Yeah. Isolated DNA, cloned farm animal, correlation in non-coding regions of DNA, so on and so forth. You know, these are qualities of bacteria, existence of cell-free fetal DNA and maternal blood. And so a lot of these are medical diagnostics. And so medical diagnostics is an area where it can be challenging to understand where the line of eligibility is drawn. I'm sorry, say it again. Mayo is medical diet. Thank you. So here we are. We're still on step 2. And we've broken out step 2 into the 2 prongs. 2A has now 2 prongs. And so step 2A prong 1 says, does the claim recite an abstract idea, law of nature, or natural phenomenon? If no, that's where you want to be, then it's not directed to a judicial exception, and you're eligible. So, but if yes, does the claim recite additional elements that integrate the judicial exception into a practical application? So practical application, you want to be yes, and then you're out of this framework. But if no, then you still go to step 2B. And 2B and 2A prong 2, there is some overlap. But we'll talk a little bit more about prong 2 of step 2A. Here are some examples that provide a limitation that's indicative of integration into a practical application. The first one is an improvement to the functioning of a computer or to any other technology or technical field. The second one is applying or using a judicial exception to affect a particular treatment or prophylaxis for a disease or medical condition. Applying the judicial exception with or by use of a particular machine, affecting a transformation or reduction of a particular article to a different state of or thing, and then or applying the judicial exception in some other meaningful way beyond generally linking the use of the judicial exception to a particular technological environment such that the claim as a whole is more than a drafting effort designed to monopolize the exception. Now, I included these portions of the MPEP, and this is gonna be a refrain. The MPEP provides a lot of examples, and it's very helpful to understand where you are, where your claims are, where you want to be, how to get around a 101 rejection. And then the other thing I would actually also emphasize is this is an area where a discussion, an interview with the particular examiner, if you could participate in it, but certainly your US counsel could set up an interview and discuss what might help overcome the 101 rejection to get to perhaps the 102s and the 103s, and the 112s also is a good interview practice. So there's a lot of information in the MPEP, but sort of understand where you want to be based on that information, but also utilize that information in a way that can be productive to move prosecution forward by having a discussion with the examiner and understanding what his impression is of his art unit, his speed, his experience that he might have a little bit more in some of these very particularized areas. So some more on prong 2's considerations. We just talked about ones that were indicative of integration into the practical application, which is where you want to be. This is where you do not want to be if you want a patent, is in limitations that are not indicative of integration into a practical application. So saying things that like apply it with or mere instructions to implement an abstract idea on a computer, or just uses the computer as a tool to perform an abstract idea. And we'll get into this a little bit later and sort of understand where that line is. So the second one is adding insignificant extra solution activity to the judicial exception, or generally linking the use of the judicial exception to a particular technological environment or field of use. And again, these are words that are coming out of case law, and we're trying to understand what the courts are telling us. And that's part of the challenge here, is that you can read these words and understand what you think they mean, but it's also developed through the courts. And then whether claimant elements represent only well understood routine conventional activity is considered at step 2B and is not a consideration at step 2A. Here we go, magic words, significantly more. Step 2B, if the claim is directed to a judicial exception, the examiner should determine whether any additional element or combination of additional elements in the claim is sufficient to ensure that the claim as a whole amounts to significantly more than the judicial exception. And if the additional elements ensure the claim as a whole amounts to significantly more than the judicial exception, the claim is eligible. So, significantly more, I would, that looks like the Portuguese that corresponds to significantly more. So, is that right? I'm getting it. This is only day 2. Watch out. I'm going to take your job, Bia. So here we go. So limitations that are indicative of an inventive concept, aka, I'm going to do it again, significantly more. Improvements to the functioning of a computer or to any other technology or technical field, applying the judicial exception with or by use of a particular machine, affecting a transformation or reduction of a particular machine to a different state or thing, applying or using the judicial exception in some other meaningful way beyond generally linking the use of the judicial exception to a particular technological environment such that the claim as a whole is more than a drafting effort designed to monopolize the exception. And then adding a specific limitation other than what is well understood, routine, conventional activity in the field. This is a challenging area, I will admit. So here we go. This is the last slide before we move on to some of the guidance and some of the example. But this is the framework under which we use that we follow. These are limitations that are not indicative of an inventive concept, aka significantly more. Adding the words apply it or the equivalent with the judicial exception, or mere instructions to implement an abstract idea on a computer, or merely uses a computer as a tool to perform the abstract idea, adding insignificant extra solution activity, generally linking the use of the judicial exception to a particular technological environment or field of use, and simply appending well understood routine conventional activities previously known to the industry specified at a high level of generality to the judicial exception. So what they're really talking about here is looking at the claim and understanding really what, if anything, has been added to bring it out of that case law. USPTO's guidance, we have 46 examples, and we're going to talk about 4 of them. I'm only going to talk about 2. Hasan's going to do the other 2. I would have asked him to do all 4, but he didn't want to. So here he goes. USPTO has a guidance in 46 examples. And these are the big categories that you can start to look at, and you can start to say, okay, where am I? There's the claim type, and there's the different types in there. Is which judicial exception, where am I there? Under the detailed analysis, is it streamlined? Are we prong 2A1? Are we prong 2A, 1 again, markedly different? Are we step 2A prong 2? Is the exception integrated into a practical application? Step 2B, is the claim eligible because it provides an inventive concept? And then here are considerations that are, and there's some overlap here for step 2A prong 2 or step 2B. So, and there are in these examples, and these are all on the USPTO website. So there's a summary table that helps you understand where you might want to be with different claims, like if you're looking at a particular rejection, that rejection is probably based on one of these examples. And now you can read that example, and there's more explanation as to why it's rejected under 101. And you can say, oh, I understand now how to address the 101 rejection. But again, there's 46 examples. These are on the website and USPTO's website, but there are 3 different tables. One is all issues where you have issue spotting. One are abstract idea examples where this is where most of the computer stuff that we were talking about earlier, that's where those will be. And then there's a whole nother chart that's talking about the markedly different characteristics analysis. And I can highlight that in English. That's markedly different. Or significantly more is what I was doing earlier. So here are the web pages, again, for the resources. It's this uspto.gov/patent eligibility. There's the MPEP starting with 2106. And then there's all these examples, and these are linked through, maybe not directly, but they're all, if you start clicking around there, they're all up there. Now, oh no. This is the wrong presentation. I think it is. Okay. So in these examples that we're going to go over, the excerpts are of the specification, and the analysis is abbreviated and is not complete, meaning we have saved you some effort of reading additional words on the screen. So if you want to read more about these examples, understand that we're not painting a full picture. We're painting what we think is important to give you enough information to understand our discussion today. And the complete specification and analysis can be found in the examples website listed on, well, I said the last page of the presentation, but I'm guessing it's not the last page anymore. But yeah, it's on the patent eligibility site. So with that in mind, I believe, example 43, that means it's Hasan's turn. Thank you.
This one is this one forward. Okay. Thanks, Gordon. I'm just going to start building on the foundation you laid out very well. So there's going to be 2 biotech examples. The first one is treatment claims, and the second one is product claims. So I'll give you guys a minute to read this. So you don't need to read it too carefully. I have it summarized, the most important points, but if you could take a minute just to look at what it's about, and then I can go over the main points. These are hypothetical examples, by the way. So this example is about treating a disease, specifically treating a kidney disease. The hypothetical disease is NAS3, and it's a rapidly progressing disease, and it's associated with the formation of protein crystals inside the kidney. So if someone has this disease, very rapidly, they start having kidney failure. And according to the hypothetical, about 2/3 of the patients develop kidney failure within 5 years. So it's very rapidly progressing. There is a first-line treatment for this disease, which is glucocorticoids. But unfortunately, some patients don't respond well to glucocorticoids. So if patients don't respond to glucocorticoids, there are other treatments. Those are rapamycin, which is a drug, and plasmapheresis, which is a blood treatment. But these are dangerous treatments because they're life-threatening. So glucocorticoids should always be used first. But then there's another complication, because it takes a long time for doctors to understand whether glucocorticoids are going to work or not. So that's also part of the fact pattern. And by the time they realize that it's going to work, sometimes if the patient is not responding, they're already starting to have kidney failure. So the problem is, can you figure out a way to know if the patient will respond or not to glucocorticoids? That's the real problem. And this applicant has found a solution. The applicant has found that a high ratio of two proteins, C11 to C13, if there's a high ratio, that indicates that the patient will not respond to glucocorticoids. So if you have that information in the beginning, then you can give them the second treatment and you can avoid kidney failure. So it's a very important invention. The applicant discloses the calculation of this ratio, which optimizes treatment protocols. So we have claim is this the right claim one? Okay, one. Oh yeah, this doesn't correspond to mine. Okay, where we go? Okay. So we have claim one here. And remember, just when you first look at the claim, just ask yourself, how close is this to nature? Is this very close to nature? If it's very close to what's found in nature, then you got to ask yourself, do I need to do the analysis? And that's generally how I think about these claims. Like if there's a lot in there besides nature, you still have to do the analysis, but you're probably safe. If it's very close to what's in nature, then you probably are more on the side of not being safe for subject matter eligibility. So this is a treatment method, and there's two steps to the treatment method. The first is calculating a ratio of C11 to C13 levels in a blood sample from a patient diagnosed with the disease, NAS3, to identify the patient as a non-responder. So remember, this applicant has figured out a way to figure out whether the patient will respond or not to the first treatment, glucocorticoids. And then the step B is administering a treatment, and no specific treatment is just any treatment to the non-responder. So the first step is calculating a ratio, and the second is administering any treatment. So when we do the analysis in this claim, we find that it's not patent eligible. So when we go through the step 2A and step 2B analysis, step 2A is there a judicial exception. So claim 1A, the first step requires a calculation. So when you see a calculation, like Gordon had mentioned, you got to think, is there more than just a calculation? And here, there's not really, the whole invention here is the calculation in step 1A. So it requires a calculation, and that falls into the mathematical concept and the mental process. So it's an abstract idea. When you see a mathematical concept, it usually falls into abstract idea exception. But there's also a natural relationship because the body is creating these proteins. So it's a natural phenomenon within the body. And there's not really anything more than that. So when you see something happening inside the body, that's also a trigger for non-eligible subject matter. So when you see the ratio, the protein ratio leading to something like non-responsive to a drug, then that's a natural phenomenon. So we go to step 2 to see if there's any practical application. So like when we were talking about adding additional steps or significantly more, step B is not really significantly more. It's saying just administering a treatment. It's not giving any specific treatments or anything more than that. So it's very generic. So the conclusion is that the claim as a whole does not integrate the judicial exception into a practical application. There's no real practical application to this. It's just the calculation, the natural phenomenon, and no practical application. So it's not eligible. Okay, so the next 3 claims are all treatment claims. It's using the method for a method of treatment. They're reciting particular treatments, all three of these claims. So these claims are patent eligible because they integrate the judicial exception into a practical application. So whenever you see a specific treatment, it's probably okay. It's probably patent eligible because it's a practical application. And the last one for this example, Claim 5 recites a method comprising administering one of the drugs, the second drugs, rapamycin, to a patient having identified having the disease NAS3. The administration of a specific drug, so you have a specific drug here, rapamycin. In the first claim, there was no specific drug. Here you do have one, and you have a specific patient. So that's enough to get over the patent eligible, the 101 rejection. And it's not, and at this point, you're at 2A. It's not even a judicial exception at this point because it's not falling into any of the judicial exceptions. So the more specific you get, the better it is in terms of subject matter eligibility. And this is the next one. This is the product example. And this is the denveric acid, which is named dedicated to our friend David, who's from Denver. So this example, and I'll give you a minute also to kind of read this one, and I'll give you the important parts of it. Oh wait, is this the right one? Oh, that one, sorry. Yeah. So here, so the applicant discovers a protein, but that protein isn't found in nature in a tree, in the bark of a tree. So that's where nature comes in. When administered to human, denveric acid reduces the need for insulin. It has low side effects, a lower profile side effect than other drugs, but it requires more frequent dosing. And the claims recite several products comprising denveric acid. So the applicant discloses 3 different treatment profiles: short-acting, intermediate. The drug itself, denveric acid, naturally is short-acting. But the applicant also discloses intermediate acting, a little bit longer than short acting. And it's also known in the art how to create intermediate acting. That's not inventive. It's already known in the art. And then applicant also finally discloses a 3rd profile, which is long acting. And that is a mixture of denveric acid and protamine, another chemical. So when they mix those 2 chemicals, you get a long-acting profile. So we get to claim 1. It's a very short claim: a dosage unit comprising denveric acid in a container. So when you look at this, you see the natural product denveric acid and not much else. So naturally, I would think it's probably leaning towards not eligible because we don't have the additional things that the courts require. And indeed, in this example, it's ineligible. We go through the analysis. So prong 1, which is the judicial exceptions. Here, there's no structural or functional difference between the claimed denveric acid and what's found in nature. It's only the drug in a container and no specific container, nothing else. So we go to prong 2, and they might have added container to say, oh, well, it's not a product of nature, but because it's in a container. But it's a very generic limitation because it can be any container. There's no specificity to the container, and any drug needs to be held in a container anyways. It just can't be on the table. So it's something that would have had to happen anyway. So there's no real practical application for this exception, and it's not eligible. So claim 2. This has more stuff in it. So now you're thinking, okay, it has more specificity. So it's probably okay. It's probably patent eligible. So claim 2 recites a dosage unit of claim 1 with a container. It's a wearable device, delivery device, so it'll deliver the drug, and it has a specific configuration, and it has a lot of specific things in the specific configuration. So claim 2 is actually eligible. Even though it's in a container, there's a lot of stuff described, claimed, a lot of claim recitations that specifically describe the container. The container is an integral part of the claim. So the drug denveric acid is stored and injected in the container. So it's not just stored, but it's also injected. And so there's like, the limitations are meaningful in a way that removes it from the 101 rejection. And it's integrated into a practical application. So claim 3 recites the dosage unit of claim 1, comprising an intermediate acting. So remember, we had short, intermediate, and long acting. Claim 3 is also eligible because intermediate acting denveric acid is markedly different. That markedly different language is from the Supreme Court case that Gordon mentioned, compared to what's found in nature. Remember, in nature, it's short acting. When you have intermediate acting, even though it's known how to make it, it's different than what's found in nature. And that's good enough for, there may be a 101 rejection, but at least it's patent eligible. Excuse me, there may be a 103 obviousness rejection, but in terms of 101, it's eligible. And finally, claim 4 recites the dosage unit of claim 1, comprising a mixture. Remember, when you mix protamine and denveric acid, you get the longest acting. So it's a mixture that the applicant discovered, and this is also patent eligible because it's a functional property. It's different than the sum of its parts. Denveric acid itself is short acting, protamine is inert, but when you mix them, you get more than the sum of the parts. You get a long acting. And that's markedly different than what's found in nature, so it's patent eligible. And that's it for the biotech examples, and I'll hand it back to Gordon.
Excellent. Thank you, Hasan. That was I'm always amazed that you understand any of that. So thank you. I will now give 2 of the most recent examples for computer implemented technologies, abstract ideas. And the first example comes out of one of those Supreme Court cases from the 1970s or 1980s, early 80s, before the 4 more recent Supreme Court cases. So this is example 45 relates to a controller for an injection mold. So even though it's computer implemented, I still chose one that's closer to chemical engineering. This involves the application of step 2 to product claims, reciting a machine or manufacturer, meaning a controller, for controlling the injection molding of a hypothetical chemical polyurethane polymer X46. And the next 3 slides has a lot of text. There's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to try and just summarize these really quickly. I'm going to make it really difficult on the translators, so apologies in advance because I'm going to skip around. So the important thing to think about injection molding is you need to cross-link the polymers, you need to control the temperature, you need to open up the mold at a certain time, and you need to do all these things in order to get a product that works. So this is about the control system the programmed control system using the natural processes that happen in order to effectively create the product. So again, injection molding is a manufacturing process that's commonly used to form plastic articles by injecting raw, uncured material into a mold, then heating it to cure the material and obtain a product that retains its shape. In this case, the polymer is useful for skateboards, and there's cross-linking of particular molecules. The monomers are polyisocyanates and polyols, and the curing process cross-links them to form a large polyurethane polymer. And the proper curing depends on several factors, particularly temperature. And in this hypothetical, the polymer is cured within a temperature range of 30 to 100 degrees C. The conversion rate of the polymer obeys the Arrhenius equation with an optical curing at 85 degrees C. And the important thing to know is, Arrhenius equation right there. See, I did it again. Arrhenius equation is a well-known, well-described phenomenon. You can pick up a chemical engineering textbook from anywhere from the last 50, maybe even 100 years, and that's really well known. So the applicant describes a standard or conventional injection mold apparatus to achieve making its skateboard wheels. And the specification describes how the controller operates the molding apparatus, sending control signals, monitoring heat, heating the mold, and then ejecting the molded polyurethane. And then again, the controller receives the temperature of the mold from a thermometer or other device, such as an industrial thermometer, having a known thermocouple and a USB plug to connect it to the controller. So some of the things to remember here is that sounds kind of conventional. It doesn't sound like it's anything inventive. So the controller uses the mold temperatures to monitor and adjust, if necessary, the mold temperature by comparing the obtained temperature to a target temperature, and then sending signals to heat within 2 degrees, maintaining the mold temperature at that set range. The controller prevents the occurrence of undesirable side reactions that would otherwise negatively affect the cured polyurethane's strength and wear performance. And again, we're talking about using the extent of curing using this Arrhenius equation that's well known. The hypothetical claim 1 is this claim, and I'll let you read it. And the answer of whether it's eligible or not is already on the slide. So, but we'll let you read the claim, and it's essentially a controller that's configured to obtain measurements, calculate an extensive curing using the Arrhenius equation and the obtained temperatures, and then determining the extent of the polyurethane that's cured as a percentage. Now, claim 1 is ineligible because it's directed to a judicial exception, the abstract idea, which is and the claim as a whole does not integrate the exceptions into a practical application or amount to significantly more than the exceptions. And again, all you're really doing here is you've just in words described what the Arrhenius equation already tells everybody who's studied injection molding and curing of polymers for the past 50 to 100 years. So this whole lot of words, but the inventive concept is still directed to an abstract idea, and it does not integrate any exceptions. So, but all is not lost, because you can have additional claims where you have additional limitations, and limitation D is an additional step beyond that's what's already used in the Arrhenius equation, in which control signals are sent to the injection molding apparatus. Once the polyurethane has reached a target percentage, the control signals instruct the apparatus to open the mold and eject the polyurethane from the mold, because nothing in the Arrhenius equation says anything about opening a mold. So all of a sudden now you have an eligible claim, even though it doesn't seem like a whole lot more, because you can't really make, you could imagine you could make and cure the polymer without having this automatic opening and ejection. And that's where the USPTO will say that's significantly more. So again, claim 2 recites the same judicial exception as claim 1, but is eligible because it recites other meaningful limitations that use the abstract idea to improve the previous molding technology such that the claim integrates the exceptions into a practical application, ejecting the molded polyurethane from the mold. Claim 3. All right, so claim 3 is a dependent claim, also similar to claim 2, and claim 3 also is eligible. So claim 3 is a system that includes the controller of claim 1 that's connected to a means for temperature measuring that repeatedly measures the temperature of the mold. And this renders the claim eligible because even though it recites the same judicial exception and it lacks any additional elements that integrate the exceptions into a practical application, but it's eligible because in step 2B, it recites a specific and unconventional tool in the data gathering steps that amounts to significantly more than the exceptions. And those are the means for temperature measuring that repeatedly measures the temperature of the mold. Claim 4 is a new independent claim, and there is a lot of words, but unlike claim 1, these words render it eligible, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But here it's the controller for injection molding, having the mold defining a cavity, receiving uncured polyurethane that's heated to form a molded article during a cycle of operation of the apparatus, and the controller is configured to sending control signals, repeatedly obtain the temperature measurements, comparing the obtained temperature measurements to the target temperature, and maintaining the temperature of the mold within 2 degrees. And you remember that the 2 degrees was necessary to prevent side reactions. So this is eligible because it recites a different judicial exception than previous, it recites a different judicial exception than the previous 3 claims, but it's eligible because it recites other meaningful limitations that use the abstract idea to improve the previous molding technology, such that the claim as a whole integrates the exception into the practical application. And one takeaway I think you'll start to appreciate is that this is very fact dependent. This is something where you need to understand all of the examples and all of the cases, because some of these claims don't feel different, but they are different under US law. The last example we're going to talk about is, example 46, livestock management. This is also a computer implemented invention, and it's, to me, whoever came up with this is frankly really creative, because I would not have thought, let's come up with a computer related example and also involve livestock. So I love reading this example. So this involves the application of step 2A to claims for obtaining and analyzing identification and behavioral data of livestock animals such as dairy cattle. So gone are the days of the rancher, and in are the days of maybe AI managing our dairy farms. Some of the important information is that there's a hypothetical thing that's called, it's a real nutritional deficiency called grass tetany, grass staggers, that affects ruminant animals such as cattle and sheep. And so monitoring the behavior of their livestock animals, such as dairy cattle, can provide vital clues as to their general health. And traditionally, farmers have monitored livestock behavior by physically and visually inspecting the animals at regular intervals. But these non-traditional practices are labor intensive and require the farmer to remain in close proximity to the herd. And I grew up in Texas, and I spent a lot of time on a piece of property that was 1,000 acres. I don't know what that is in square meters, but it's very, very, very large. And it was a cattle birthing operation where they would birth young cows. And then once they hit a year old, They were sent off somewhere else to be fattened. So there was a lot of making sure that the baby cows were healthy. And so this is a way of monitoring that. So the applicant has invented a system and method for automatically detecting and tracking the behavior of these animals. Central computer, there's a sensor in each of the animal, and there's a reader for obtaining information from the sensors. Computer has all the things you typically think: keyboard, display, communications, touchscreen, processor, and the processor is programmed with executable instructions that involve doing some of these things: comparing, analyzing, displaying obtained information regarding our cattle, our dairy cattle. Claim 1. And again, there's a lot of words here. And so what does the system involve? The system involves a memory, a display, a processor, a livestock interface for obtaining animal specific information, and a whole bunch of other stuff, information about the cattle, and then a monitoring component that compares, analyzes, and displays. And all of those things, and you take a step back, and what the law says is that it's not enough. Even though you put all those words in your claim, it's not enough, because it recites a judicial exception. It's an abstract idea, and the claim as a whole does not integrate the exception into a practical application or amount to significantly more, because limitations, and this is even, we're going to look at the monitoring component on this previous slide. So I'm going to go back. So the last limitation, the monitoring component, there are 3 steps, A, B, and C, or 3 limitations under the monitoring component. And you think, well, that looks like, to me, it starts to feel like significantly more. But limitations A and B are viewed as merely abstract ideas, where you start comparing the obtained animal information with animal information from a database to verify an animal's identity, analyzing the animal specific behavior to identify whether the animal is exhibiting aberrant behavior compared to past behavior. So these are still abstract ideas. There's no practical application. This is again, is sort of what the old ranchers used to do and the farmers used to do before computers. They just did it visually and in their head. So these mental steps, you say, do it with a computer, it's not enough. And then the memory, the display, and the processor, and the livestock interface, and limitation C, the display, are all additional elements, but they do not integrate the exception into a practical application or amount to significantly more, because they are mere instructions to apply the exceptions on a computer and are insignificant extra solution activity. So bringing it out of this example, where a lot of this will then come out on computer related, is just by saying, hey, there's a processor, hey, there's a memory, hey, we have computer, the executable instructions. That's not enough. These steps, they're still abstract ideas. And so the examples will give you a good idea of where to go. Claim 2 adds a few things. It adds a feed dispenser that can dispense in individualized amounts of feed and optional supplements once the cow is identified. So now you start to say, oh, what's going on? What's being used? What's that information being used for? And then there's a monitoring component that sends control signals about the aberrant behavior. This claim is eligible because although it recites the same judicial exceptions, it has other meaningful limitations. And those other meaningful limitations are that feed dispenser, and when these other meaningful limitations are evaluated in combination, they integrate those exceptions into a practical application. So the farmer, going back to the old ranchers, the ranchers didn't automatically feed based on what they've observed. They just observed. They didn't have some sort of system connected to their brain that dispensed feed. But note that, where am I? Yeah. So note that because none of the exceptions in claim 2 encompass actually dispensing therapeutic salt and minerals. There's no limitation in the claim that can invoke the particular treatment or prophylaxis consideration. That's one of the considerations under these multi-factor tests. But there's this feed dispenser. So claim 3 is, again, a lot of text. And it starts to feel more than just a computer apply it. It's causing a herd of livestock to enter a sorting gate. So we have a physical sort of herding, apparatus. And then that has a sensor with a radio frequency transponder, identify for a particular animal in the herd, obtaining the radio frequency reader mounted on or near the sorting gate, blah, 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 body position data, feeding behavioral data. So what is this particular cow? What is their data telling me about them? You analyze the data that's obtained, and you determine whether the animal is exhibiting an aberrant behavioral pattern as compared to the past animal, and then automatically operating the sorting gate to open and close it, to route the animal into a holding pen when the analysis results for the animal to indicate the animal is exhibiting aberrant behavior pattern. And then it's more processor sending the control signals. So basically it's reading the tags, figuring out whether this cow should be separating the cow with an automatic gate. And then you repeat it through for everybody, for the entire size of the herd. So claim 3, as you probably got a sense, although it recites a different judicial exception, which is also an abstract idea. It's eligible because it recites other meaningful limitations, which in combination integrate the exception into a practical application. So not just here's a computer, apply it, here's our method. It's some physical things that are going on and happening that may not always be possible. But in this example, it's not just displaying results on the screen, but I would encourage you to read the examples and find one that's most similar to your factual circumstance. All right. You guys have been a great audience. We're only 2 slides left from being done. So we're almost there. We're almost there. Here we go. Claim 4, and this is the last claim we're gonna analyze. It is a new independent claim, a system for monitoring health and activity in a herd of dairy livestock animals comprising a memory, a processor coupled to the memory, programmed with executable instructions. The instructions including a livestock interface for obtaining animal-specific information, a whole bunch of stuff about the data, the body temperature data, feeding behavior data, movement pattern data, whole bunch of data. And then a herd monitor, including a radio frequency reader for collecting the animal-specific information from a plurality of animal sensors attached to the animals in the herd. When the animal sensors are within proximity to the radio frequency reader, each animal sensor having a radio frequency transponder and also a transmitter for transmitting the collected animal-specific information to the livestock interface. Rodrigo, I'm gonna ask: is a thumbs up eligible or thumbs down? Oh, you were just well, we're gonna go with thumbs up because it is eligible. So distracted or not, it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. So no, of course you knew. So claim 4 is in fact eligible because it does not recite any judicial exceptions, and then although it's eligible, it may be unpatentable for other reasons such as anticipation and or obviousness. So, and this goes back to the specification that said that the components in the system are typical or standard off-the-shelf computers and sensor components, and they're being used in the claim for their intended purposes. So even though this claim, is eligible because it's a system and it has, even though it's a memory and it's a processor, it has additional things because it doesn't recite any of the judicial exceptions. But you still have to go back to that early slide And number 5, just because you're past the 101 hurdle, it does not mean your patent's going to issue. You still have to convince the examiner that it's novel, non-obvious, enabled, definite, and so on and so forth. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for their patience, and thank you, Hasan, for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gordon, Hasan, for the brilliant presentation. I'm sure that our public here and who are watching from their offices and at home, we were counting about 50. Now we're down to 34. But I'm sure that they all appreciate your presentation. Very, very interesting. I'd like to end by reminding everyone and our viewers and invite you to register for our Congress, the 43rd Congress of the World Congress of ABPI. It's going to happen on the 20th to the 22nd of August of this year here in Rio de Janeiro. And it's going to be about IP as a promoter of social equality. Well, thank you very much. I think we have a promotional ad. And thank you again, both of you. Thank you.
A propriedade intelectual é responsável hoje por até 80% do valor das empresas. Mas isso não acontece apenas porque as empresas dão valor à sua propriedade intelectual. A propriedade intelectual vale muito porque a sociedade dá valor ao esforço de solucionar seus problemas e de lhe criar oportunidades. Nosso congresso desse ano vai reunir especialistas em propriedade intelectual, juristas, economistas do desenvolvimento e da inovação para nos guiarem nessa importante discussão. O pano de fundo escolhido não poderia ser melhor: as maravilhas da cidade do Rio de Janeiro. Para comemorar seus 60 anos de existência, a ABPI reunirá os participantes nos mirantes deslumbrantes do Pão de Açúcar, ícone turístico do Rio de Janeiro, aclamado por visitantes do mundo inteiro. Durante 3 dias, teremos a oportunidade de nos encontrarmos, fazer negócios e, sobretudo, de discutir e aprofundar nosso entendimento do papel da propriedade intelectual frente aos desafios brasileiros. Da consolidação do agronegócio ao desenvolvimento do turismo e de indústrias avançadas, da transformação digital e da transição energética ao estímulo ao empreendedorismo e à inclusão social. Participe e se engaje com o compromisso social do Congresso da BPI de 2023. Esperamos vocês de 20 a 22 de agosto na cidade maravilhosa do Rio de Janeiro.